Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania.
Where we discuss history and haunting.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
And today is an extra special episode. Not only is it our first video episode, but we have our friends at Twice the Terror joining us. You can find them at Twice the Terror on Instagram. They also post their podcast on YouTube and Spotify, so go check them out. They are with the Pittsburgh Ghost Tours, so they have great knowledge of all things paranormal, and it is so much fun to get to work with another local group. Definitely go check them out, and without further ado, let's get into it. On the episode, we have Twice the Terror here. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Ryan.
I'm Kat.
Yeah, we're the hosts of Twice the Terror, which is a podcast presented by Haunted Pittsburgh, where Haunted Pittsburgh is a walking tour. And basically our show is just it's a lot of fun. We talk about all things paranormal, supernatural, horror related, you name it. We're just kind of like chatting about whatever we kind of feel like that episode. It's a lot of fun.
And for anyone who wants to learn more about Haunted Pittsburgh, you can check us out at hauntedpittsburghtours.com. We should be starting our downtown tour hopefully soon, as soon as Pittsburgh stops Pittsburghing and the weather clears up a little bit and we can actually go around downtown without getting sleet. So
yes,
give us a follow on Facebook, and you can also find our podcast at Twice the Terror on Instagram and the TikTok app.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I'm so excited to have you guys on because your first episode was on cryptids, which is what we're talking about today. So you guys are like experts on this topic.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
As I mentioned earlier, Ryan's like the true expert. I'm just a spooky idiot, and but I love cryptids, and we're very happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. So we've talked about a lot of haunted places on the podcast, and as you guys know, we normally focus on one location, but today's a little different. We're going to talk about 5 different monsters that I'm going to present, and then you guys are going to share one that you have. So some of these places we've already discussed on previous podcasts, but we've never discussed these monsters that lurk in the Pennsylvania forests. So the first we're going to talk about is the Cook Forest werewolf, and this is in the Pennsylvania wilds, and that episode actually dropped today. It's about aliens, so we didn't talk about this, but to get into the history, because here at PIP we do history and hauntings a bit, this actually dates back to the 1830s. And in the 1830s, there was a woman named Elizabeth Paul that fell in love with a much older man. And it says that the two of them would meet up specifically at nighttime when it was not a full moon to talk in the woods. And it said that they would watch over the Paul family sheep and make sure that no wolves bothered them, which I find ironic given that he's said to be a werewolf.
Yeah.
Right.
But during that time, there were a lot of issues with wolf attacks in Cook Forest, and this led to some local hysteria over potential werewolves being in the area. So one night, a man shot a werewolf and tried to track it through the forest, but no one could find it. What they did find in the forest was Elizabeth's boyfriend shot through the heart. And when they found him, he had long yellow teeth and stiff hair on his hands and feet as if he died mid-transition.
Wow. Eat your heart out, Stephanie Meyer.
I know.
Oh, wow.
I know. Ryan, you keep saying yes. Are you familiar with this story?
Yes, and the fascinating thing to me is the fact that Elizabeth Paul was actually a real person. So that's the fascinating thing, is there is some like historical evidence of this legend, which I find really, really cool. You hear these legends all the time. These, is it real? Is it not? And there's some like documented evidence that at least she was a real person. So kind of fascinating. It's very cool.
I always think it's so cool when there's paranormal stuff going on and then people can trace back records. Like for us, the specific places we're doing, when they can track records and find the ghosts that they're identifying, it's so cool.
That is
Absolutely.
I love that. So this Elizabeth, we know that she was a real person. So is there a grave site Is
Yes.
there is. Oh my God.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but the next part of it is she does have a real grave. And the legend has it that there's been werewolf sightings in the area because that the pack of her boyfriend still comes and routinely watches over her grave to make sure that she's safe.
Oh, that's so cute. Also, road trip. Like,
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think Cook Forest is that far.
Ooh, ooh.
And I love that the pack, like, you know, in the legend or like in the story, that the pack is like protecting her grave and everything. It's truly romantic, and it's not as problematic as Jacob.
Right.
We don't talk about him here.
Yeah.
No, I was always Team
Yeah.
Edward. I'm on your side. Constantly Team Edward all the way.
I was more of a Buffy person, so I'm over here like, where's my Spike? Like, where's my Spike character?
Mhm. Yeah, Edward was a little creepy, breaking into windows and watching people
Yeah.
sleep. So
Well, there is also that.
That's also fair.
There's that famous shot of Robert Pattinson just like staring at her in the, you know, and it just looks
my
like
God.
the most awkward thing ever. He's just like staring directly at her in this weird, like, is he okay? Is there something wrong with his stomach? Like, what's going on here? Is he
They
doing
both
all
spent that entire movie battling nausea on camera, and it was horrible to watch. But
Well, and funny enough, like I did not realize this, but the events of the movie happened in a matter of like months. And like
Yes.
the first time that they like when she became obsessed with him, it was like 2 weeks. I was like, what the heck? I did not realize this as a child.
this is like pre-Tinder, and people are fast passing relationships. I'm like, oh my word.
So while they aren't really reported like Stephanie Meyer wolves, there have been reportings of bipedal wolves that have increased in the past 10 to 20 years, and specifically in the area of her grave. So very
Ooh.
interesting.
Okay.
I wonder if it gets. What would be fascinating to find out is if those reports get more prevalent when a full moon happens. You know, like I'd be curious to look that up and see when they're reported, just to see if there's any sort of you know, weird factual evidence to it. Like,
correlation.
You know, correlation. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. That'd be interesting to find out, I think.
I consider myself something of a scientist, and
That's a great point. I didn't even think of that, actually. Because I think of werewolves as not as just like a species, and I always forget about the full moon part. But that makes sense.
And also, I mean, of course, it depends on which legend and everything like that.
Right.
So there are some that are just kind of like bipedal, you know, wolf-like creatures. But yeah, that would be especially because in this story, it seems like they do kind of honor what we think of as the traditional werewolf elements, you know, him transforming back and forth, and then them going out on moonlit nights and everything, you know, out at night so it's kind of interesting to see how it all connects.
Yeah. So that was the only creature that I was actually very familiar with. The rest of these were pretty new to me. So next we have the Hemlock Forest Squonk. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And
we're big
fans.
Yeah. Big fans of
Oh,
Squonk.
good. I'm so good. Well, okay. You probably know this history, but the first mention that I could find comes from the 1910 book called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods. And legend says that this creature has saggy skin covered with warts and overall looks like a large pig rat combination with many, I already said the warts part, and long teeth. And this is really sad. And I know you guys probably know it, but Erica, you're such an empathetic person, it's going to make you sad. It's said that because it's so ashamed of its appearance, it hides and it spends most of its time crying.
Oh my God.
It is the
so
saddest
sad.
cryptid.
Yes.
This
It's so
poor
sad.
thing.
And I know. And it said that they're actually capable of dissolving completely into pools of tears when needed, which is even sadder to me.
Yeah, that is.
There's a specific account of the in the hemlock forest of Pennsylvania of J.P. Wentling, who captured the creature in a bag and carried it home. But as he was walking home, he noticed that the bag was getting noticeably lighter. And when he got home, he found that all that remained inside was liquid and there was no animal in there at all.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That's crazy.
I'm gonna draw the line at dampness. Like I love the squonk, and I think it's such like a cute. I mean, I know the point is that it's supposed to be ugly, but I think it's cute and it's kind of sweet in a way. But no, I'm not touching anything damp like that. Like
That's fair. That's very fair.
Draw the line at that.
And also, how does it maintain that amount of like liquid in its body if it's crying constantly?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, man, it's got to stay hydrated. It needs some Gatorade. Squonk needs some Gatorade.
Yeah,
electrolytes.
Yeah.
It's what the squonk craves.
You know, that's an interesting thing. None of these said anything about these creatures eating or drinking anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what's their diet? Because I need to know.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that is. I mean, you know, the Cook Forest werewolf, you can kind of assume, it's eating some sort of meat animal, you know, of some sort. But yeah, the squonk, it's like, what is its diet? Like, is it just like, you know?
If it is in Pittsburgh, it does rain a lot. So maybe it gets its water from.
It's just soaking up.
It's like a sponge.
The rain.
It's like a kitchen sponge. The squonk.
Yes.
It's actually just Spongebob in the forest.
Yes. Oh my god.
Yeah,
but he isn't ready.
You're out in the forest and you're. Who's that?
Oh my gosh. It is said that you can actually hunt these creatures, which I think is mean because they don't want to be seen. But to hunt them, you can follow the trail of their tears. And you have to avoid startling the creature or it will turn instantly into a puddle.
Oh.
And it's said that if you want to catch it, you should catch it in a cage so that it can't turn to water. Because if you're like walking with it turning to water, it will be like leaving pieces of itself behind.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So yeah, I went to bucket. I was immediately like,
Yeah.
I was like, won't it just leak out the sides? But I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad though.
Why would you want to catch it?
Right.
Like, why
Leave
it be? It's so sad. It lives its entire life
in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania, listening to like The Cure. Like it's a sad creature. Like and somebody's like, I want that in my collection. Like, why? Just leave the thing alone.
I think the sad PA band should definitely be 9 Inch Nails. I know that Ohio gets the credit for it because they formed in Cleveland, but Trent Reznor's from Mercer County, so I'm just gonna appropriate him and say like, no, he's one of us.
There you go.
Yes.
So the squonk is just in the woods listening to March of Pigs.
Yes, I mean somebody go get him a band tee. All right, just get him a 9 Inch Nails band tee. He'll feel a little better. Okay.
Right, or at least don't chase it. It made it. What I read, the historical account made it sound like people were like actively hunting these creatures in mass. Which is crazy to me.
Yeah, that's horrible. Most animals just want to be left alone. I don't know how we humans have not realized that by now.
That's a good
point.
Like
cute aggression, but the opposite.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, it's like spooky aggression.
Yes.
No.
Oh, that's weird. I want to touch it.
So the next one is probably my favorite of all 5, and maybe I should have saved it for last, but it is the Raystown Ray, which I had never heard of, and I've been to Raystown Lake multiple times. It's the largest lake in Pennsylvania, and there's a resort right on it. It's surrounded a lot by private land, so unless you're at the resort, it can be kind of hard to get to there. But here we have our own version of the Loch Ness Monster, and there are reports across decades of this lake monster. The locals have named the monster Ray, of course, and there are even photos that capture shapes in the lake that could be the monster, whether it's sticking up or it's the form of a shadow. And there's a first-hand account of it stating, quote, I saw a dark shape moving in the water at least 50 yards out. At first glance, I thought it was a beaver, but it wasn't moving like a beaver, end quote. And I thought that was interesting because I think of like reptilian creature, not
Yeah.
beaver.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
And
no.
much larger.
Yeah.
Like
I was gonna say,
how,
Right.
how big is this thing?
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess Sarah, did you find anywhere like where it said the size of the creature itself, the lake monster, like how big it's supposed to be?
No, but there was an image of the shadow and a canoe, and it was significantly larger than the canoe.
Oh,
So we're
jeez.
talking big.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah, like,
wow.
but
Right, the
moving
math
like a
ain't math.
beaver. That's so interesting. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what that means. If it means like on top of the water, because they like.
Yeah, I guess
don't know.
I've never looked at how a beaver moves, and I've seen plenty of videos of like a beaver holding like, like a squash or something, and it's like walking on land, but like I've never seen them in water. So I wonder how they move, and that's interesting. Also, what a very specific thing, for that
Yeah.
person to be
Yes.
like, it moved like a beaver. I don't know why that's his accent, but like that's, he's just like, and somebody's like, exactly, I know what you mean. I'm like, I don't.
Was it a lot of
Yeah.
tail action? Like, was it like flapping its tail through the water? Like,
Maybe.
kind
I think I was picturing, I don't know why, but I was picturing Perry the platypus from Phineas and Ferb in my head.
Yeah.
Like, just like, but that's like fully land, so I don't really think that applies here.
It's
Harry the
actually
platypus?
teal. Yeah.
Oh,
There are
that's
also reports of when they see these large shadows on the lake, boats experiencing extreme turbulence and sometimes needing to go back to the shore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there is correlation. So, of course, there's no actual photo of this. Everything's just suggested, and there's no definitive evidence. But the locals say that the monster does live there and simply moves around so that it hides. And my favorite part of this was they actually interviewed a local professional marine biologist, or maybe just a biologist, to ask his opinion about if Ray exists and at all, and if Ray does exist, what its characteristics would be, which I think is interesting because my background's science. So I'm like, okay, here you are talking to this very scientific person, asking them to talk about the Loch Ness Monster of Pennsylvania. And the professional biologist said that if Ray exists, it's an herbivore and gentle in nature. And the reason is because there's no evidence of any local like ducks or other waterfowl or crops or anything being harmed. So it would be an herbivore, and since we haven't seen it, it wouldn't be aggressive. It would be something that likes to hide, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the lake is man-made, correct? Like it was dammed up, and that's kind of which makes it even more interesting that it is almost like possibly trapped there. Like, they've dammed this whole thing up, and this creature got stuck there. But then now it's just super gentle and doesn't care. Like it's just like, so I'm fine here.
Right.
Whatever.
Maybe they're populating it with fish and they just made a mistake and like.
Right. That's actually a really interesting point. Also because it's been around for ever. So how long does it live?
Yeah. Oh,
right.
yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Huh.
Is it able to like reproduce by itself? Is this like generate
through budding?
I would also think not, but maybe if it's like generations down.
See, now I'm going back to thinking about SpongeBob cryptids, where it's like, I reproduce through budding. Like,
yes,
that's what we need.
Is a sponge cryptid?
Yes, I think that's what we're lacking.
That's true. Well, who knows? Maybe that's what the lake monster is. I mean, no one's really seen it. People think it's reptilian, or some people claim it moves like a beaver. So who knows what it is? I mean, it could be anything.
Well, if it's Loch Ness monster like, I'm thinking, definitely underwater. I mean, maybe this is like our Squidward. It's like the squawk is SpongeBob.
Yes.
This one's Squidward. I'm sorry. This is the weirdest. This is the weirdest subplot I've ever come up with.
No, I want to keep it rolling. Let's see who else we can identify.
Yes.
The werewolf, I don't really know where that fits in, but
I was gonna
The
say
hash-
maybe Sandy, but
Hash singing slasher.
Sandy.
yes. Sandy is the Loch Ness monster. It's just Sandy. It moves like a beaver.
Oh my
That's
God,
right.
yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
perfect.
oh,
there you go. The portal to Bikini Bottom is in Racetown Lake. We just didn't know it.
It's
That's where it
canon.
goes.
Well, if
Right.
Sandy is the lake monster, then the Squonk has to be Squidward, right? Because Squidward is the saddest character and is constantly upset. So Squonk's got to be Squidward.
yes.
And everyone's annoying it. So yeah,
Mm.
that is definitely the Squidward
Yeah.
mood.
I hope we can keep it going with the next one.
Yeah.
Keep it funny.
Let's see.
Something else interesting about Ray is that it only really appears in April, which I thought, again, from like a biology perspective, is really interesting. From a paranormal perspective, there's not any significance that I know for April. Like I would think it would be associated with the moons or something, not April.
Yeah, the only as far as like holidays or ancient stuff, like Beltane's kind of around April.
Yeah.
Typically it's like the end of April, beginning of May, depending on the lunar cycle and stuff, but that would be the only thing that I could think of. And maybe it's a seasonal change thing. Typically April is when we start getting out of, well, except for this year. But like April is typically when we stop having colder weather. It starts getting a little warmer, but it's not, insanely hot or anything. And it's also when we get a lot of rainfall. So that might be it too. Maybe the lake rises and gives, it more like area.
Or it could be, maybe it's like foraging, I guess, because if it's an herbivore, I mean, maybe it's kind of like some like turtles sometimes rise to the surface, and maybe it's just like coming up, checking things out, grabbing some weeds, heading back, to put on his sweats and go sit on the couch at the bottom of the lake and, wait until this whole thing blows over kind of a situation.
Yeah, they're like
Absolutely.
tourism season. It's coming.
Yeah.
Gotta hide.
Like we've basically just caught the Racetown Ray in the midst of eating shredded cheese out of the bag in the refrigerator at midnight. Like this is the equivalent of what's happening.
I love it. So the next one is in Clinton County. And I know we already talked about pronunciation, but I'm going to go with the Giwoggle, I think. It's Giwoggle. If anyone listening knows how to pronounce it, I would love to know. And it is the official monster of Clinton County, which I think is cool. I would love Allegheny County to have an official monster. And this is thanks to Lou Bernard, who's a historian who across many years actually documented this creature to try to prove that it was real. And the creature walks on two legs and bears resemblance to a wolf, leading many to assume that it would be a werewolf. However, Bernard insists that there are biological differences because this monster has claws instead of hands, and it has hooves for feet, unlike the feet of a werewolf. And this goes back far as well. It dates back to 1870 when it was seen in the mountains nearby. And back then, it was believed that a coven of witches lived up in the mountains. So many believed that the creature was conjured by the witches and isn't from this dimension. And my favorite part of this is the petty witches. It said the witches would send this creature to harass nearby farmers that offended them. So
Oh my God.
I just picture them up in the mountains like, Farmer Joe today is pissing me off. Go down there. And some examples, in literally the article I read said petty vandalism. So examples are broken tools, crumpled troughs, and burning their corn.
Oh, that's great.
That's intense too, yeah.
It's not even like to, kill anybody. Like, I'm so angry, let's send this creature down. It's like, no, do petty stuff. It's as if they're like, send Fred the Giwoggle down. I'm assuming his name is Fred, with a spray paint can and just like write Fred was here or whatever. You know what I mean?
He has a nose ring and he's
like, what up?
Disrespect to surroundings.
And there's actually been an increase in reports of bipedal wolves across Clinton County. So this has some people guessing that the Giwoggle has bred with local wolves to create this subspecies that's part cryptid. And it said that they moved too quickly to be captured on camera, but many locals have reported them.
A Giwoofle.
That's interesting.
Woofle.
I think it's the idea of it coming from a different dimension is super cool, you know, because it's like a werewolf, but not. So maybe it's like a reality that's slightly different than ours, and that's where they got it from.
And that's a big theory on cryptids too, is like, and I guess you could apply it to a lot of these too, like the lake monster as well and things, is that the idea that they're coming from these other dimensions, that there are these rifts between our world and other ones, and it gives, that's why people can like, you know, capture footage of Bigfoot or things like that, but they never really like can find it because it's just kind of coming through for, you know, a period of time and then going back into wherever it's from. It's kind of like how people describe like, oh, you're seeing like a glitch in the Matrix type of thing. It's like that. It's like worlds colliding for a moment.
That's really cool. I did not know that theory existed. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a fun one to look into, especially when it comes to cryptids, because it just gives them a little bit more like, well, maybe this thing really did come through here, you know. It's cool. It's a lot of fun.
I really like what you said, Ryan, about it being kind of like the Matrix effect, where it's like these things are like shifting between two different worlds. Also, I love any story that has witches in it. I just that is such a great thing. Just like basically, I wish I could summon an errand boy from another world to just.
I mean, there's DoorDash.
Me explaining to my DoorDash driver, like, okay, I'm gonna need you to go to this guy's house and kick over his trash cans. Can you do this? Are we understood?
I'm just bringing you Wendy's. I don't, you know.
My lady.
Yeah. You like come out in a cloak. You're like, okay, so, ma'am,
you must do this for me. And he's like, I make minimum wage. I'm gonna just.
Now I'm picturing the Giwoggle door dashing.
That's funny. It's like in its spare time.
Full circle to SpongeBob. We've got the Krusty Krab pizza episode.
Yeah. Oh my God. Krusty Krab. I wish I could do it. Oh my God.
Does that mean the Giwoggle is like? I guess he wouldn't be plankton, would he? Because like he's kind of a nuisance, but not really. But like I don't know who else in the SpongeBob universe the Giwoggle could be.
No, I like him as SpongeBob delivering the pizza.
Specifically, he's SpongeBob.
My head. And Farmer Joe's like, "Where's my Diet Dr. Kelp?"
I do get Plankton vibes too, though. Like, because Plankton, I feel like he always thinks he's doing the most, but then somehow it gets off track and he doesn't actually do that much damage. So maybe the Giwoggle's like, I'm gonna go mess up this farm, and he goes down there and he like snaps a hammer in half and he's like, okay, he goes back home.
Got him.
What do you think the Giwoggle gets out of it? Like, does he like just enjoy being like doing like petty vandalism, or is he like, do the witches reward him in some way, or you know, because they're summoning him to do their bidding, they're very minimal bidding that they could probably just go do, but you know, then after that it's like, do they, you know, here's a candy bar, or here's, you know, a couple of dollars or something like that. I wonder what he gets out of it, or he just likes being a vandal, like he just likes vandalizing things.
So some of the things that I read did say maybe it's not from another dimension. Maybe they actually created it. So there's like a parental complex to it where it is forced to listen to them. Or they exert some sort of control.
Gotcha.
And now the Giwoggle's like, "You're not my real mom," and slams the door. Like,
yes.
We should just leave me alone.
He is Plankton, and the witch is like Karen, the computer wife.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
He's like, I'm gonna go make my own subspecies and make my own family.
And don't charge me.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I want this Dr. Phil episode. Dr. Phil?
So we have one last one from me, and that's the Bryn Athen Beast. I think I'm pronouncing that location the right way. And this creature is a dog man described as similar to Bigfoot. So it's essentially a canine, a really big canine that walks on two legs. And witness accounts say it's anywhere from 7 to 8 feet tall, depending on which ones you're reading. And it traces back to Michigan initially, where there are stories in literature of it dating to 1794. So this is our oldest that we are talking about. However, since the 1990s, there's been an increase in sightings in Montgomery County area. And the local paranormal investigators have been quoted as saying, everybody in this town knows about the beast, which I think is funny.
I do like that.
And reports say that the creature switches between 2 legs and 4 legs as it pleases. But when it's chased, instead of running away, it will actually turn and start chasing you, running on all 4 legs to achieve maximum speed.
Okay.
No, thank you.
That's a big old bag of nope from me, dog. Like,
no.
And I actually, I looked into this one a little bit and I read up on it. And my favorite thing about this story, and I hope I'm not stepping on any of your info, Sarah, but my favorite thing about it was the 2 people who quote unquote like discovered it were like 2 like guys walking through like a baseball field and saw it, and they were like, "What's that thing? Let's get it." And like that was their literal response, was just like, "We don't know what this thing is, let's get it." And I was like, that would never ever cross my mind. I'd be like, let's run the other way, and these 2 guys were just like, grab it, and then it turned around to get them. And
if that's not Eastern PA in a nutshell, I don't know what it is. Like, they're built different.
I just can't. When I read it, I had the same reaction of like, okay, it's late at night, you're walking with your friend, you see what looks like a 7 to 8 foot long dog on a baseball park. Just let it be. Just don't even do anything.
If I see a person late at night, I'm like walking the opposite way. I can't imagine
cross the street to the other side. Like, you just don't want to, like, seeing something that large and your instinct is like, yeah, I could take that. Like, that is not would never ever cross my mind. So
I feel like it's something my husband would do. He'd be like, puppy, and just go right at it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, and these local investigators did give some warnings about it. And to be fair, these warnings are kind of all over the place, but maybe they're aligned with other cryptids. I don't know. You guys can tell me. So he says to look out for unusual smells or sounds. Sounds make sense, right? We're talking about things that are unfamiliar to us. But he describes the smell as either potentially horse manure or wet dog, which could also just be smells that you smell in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Because I actually grew up by Kennett Square, which I don't know if you guys know, is the mushroom capital of the United States. And so the smell of manure was just everywhere.
Oh,
so this thing could be right next to me and I would not be able to differentiate.
You're just desensitized.
Yeah. But when it's not bothered, it's said that people observe it moving in a gliding, almost floating motion, and then it takes refuge in the woods as much as it possibly can.
That's so interesting, to hear, because we've talked about a couple ones that are very like wolf-like, or that kind of animal beast category. But the idea of this one, it really adds to the kind of supernatural element of it, that it's that it glides when it's not being. It's almost like, it's like, if you guys play games, it's almost like it's a T-posing in a video game, and it's just like gliding around everywhere unless you attack it. It's so bizarre. It's such an interesting element to this story that just gets more and more strange the more you look into this one.
Yeah, I took it as it's almost like glamoring for humans, maybe. Like when it doesn't know that it's being watched, it's moving in its natural way. But when it knows that like we're chasing it, or it's chasing us rather, it's showing itself in a way that we can perceive, because giant dogs will be scary to us. Perhaps this creature in its true form or movements we wouldn't perceive as scary.
Interesting. That's a really fascinating thought. Look at it.
like if this is something that's like, I know like a lot of people talk about like aliens that can shapeshift and things like that, and like I'm just wondering like if this is something that's capable of like either shifting its image, or maybe it just has a way of changing our perception, like what we're seeing. So maybe we're seeing a threat when actually there is no real threat. Like it's just making us see it in our heads. If I'm communicating this properly.
No, yeah. Well, it kind of lends to the idea that like we as human beings don't see things the way that a dog sees things, a cat sees things, like different amounts of rods and cone. I was actually watching a video on this recently talking about how our eyesight and how we perceive color. And there are certain people that actually have more rods and cones than your average person. And so the way they see the world is there's some artists who've done paintings of it. And it's this interesting like pastel, like extra shades of like colors and very kind of like glowy and fascinating that we just don't perceive. And so it is that thing of like, I wonder if this creature has the ability to kind of tap into that to some degree, you know, like it understands how our eyesight works. And so it can, I don't know if manipulate that is the right phrase, but it can make us perceive it in a certain way when it maybe it's almost like the what was the black and gold or blue and white dress thing that people were talking about. It's almost like that. So very cool. It's a fascinating creature and one that I wish there was more, you know, too. I know that there's like a couple people that go hunting for it. And I'd love to talk to some of the people in this town if like they all know about this creature. Like if everyone's just kind of like aware of it, but no one like talks about it. It's like this Blair Witch thing of like we don't talk about the, you know, we don't talk about the creature, the beast. So that would be fascinating. It'd be cool to do a deep dive.
Yeah, and I wonder if everybody really does know about it, if there's like local, you know, rules in place, like this is the procedure if you encounter this. Because I feel like there must be. I mean, if kids go out alone at night, there must be something you're telling them to do.
Yeah, and if this thing's just showing up at like baseball diamonds and like very public places, then there has to be some if it is actually something that is kind of like in the minds of these people that like this is a real thing and it is, you know, something to be aware of, there has to be some sort of rule set in place. Or maybe it's an unspoken thing, like, yeah, just don't go out in this direction, you know, at night when, you know, when you're out and about and you won't run into the beast. But that's curiouser and curiouser is this story. So
yeah. So those were my 5. I would love to hear your guys' take or your guys' story.
Yeah, Kat, you brought one. I'm curious what you brought.
Well, now that I know about the Brynathan or Brynathan beast, which kind of sounds like the Sandlot, like if you really think about it. No.
Oh, yeah, it does. The beast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Oh my God. Okay. Well, what I was going to bring to the table today was Ogua. I don't know if anyone knows about Ogua. The name is borrowed from either the Delaware or the Shawnee people. I tried to find the definition of it and I wasn't able to find it. But this monster is also known as the Holt monster or the Rivesville monster. And this is a creature that's said to lurk in the murky waters of the Ohio, Monongahela, and Allegheny rivers, among many others. The first sighting of Ogua was in 1745 when the Taylor and Nichols families were fishing along the banks of where the Mon River meets the Pawpaw Creek in West Virginia. A 12-year-old boy was snatched by a creature and dragged under the water, never to be seen again. The family said what they saw was essentially a half alligator, half turtle creature that was incredibly long, had a very long tail, and just grabbed the boy in its jaws and just dragged him away. The next sighting of Ogua was by a young man staying at Fort Harmer, and this is located near Marietta, Ohio. If you've never heard of it, fantastic tomatoes. It's a very Ohio-specific callback, but this is where the Muskingum River meets the Ohio. So what this man saw matched the description of what the Taylors and the Nichols saw, about a 12 to 15 foot monster, and they him and a few other men spotted this thing, and they said that they thought it could weigh anywhere between like 400 to 500 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's
That's
huge.
huge.
Massive. A couple of guys said it had 2 heads, but most people said it looked predominantly turtle-like with a very long alligator-type tail. They would frequently watch this thing at night. It would hang out on the banks somewhere like in the tree lines, and it would wait for deer to come down to the river, and it would come out and either snatch or swipe the deer with its tail, or just grab them and immediately drag them under the water. The next sighting of this thing was in 1983. So this is the most relatively recent sighting. This is a coal miner by the name of John Edward White. His description is a little bit more vague. All he said he saw was a serpentine-like tail, but a lot of people felt that it closely matched the description of Ogua. There is a spot where the Pawpaw Creek and the Monongahela River meet. There's a little bridge in West Virginia, and you can go there, and I think there's a placard, but there is an Ogua site spot. So if you want to camp out and kind of look for this thing, you can go to that bridge and look over, and hopefully you can catch a sight of probably one of the most terrifying river monsters I can think of.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a breed of snapping turtle that has a long tail like an alligator. That's kind of what this thing sounds like. It's like a giant snapping turtle that's just coming up and eating deer.
Almost like prehistoric, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a
That's what I was
story.
thinking. What? Because I always try to think of these things through skeptical lenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what else could this be that's that big? But I can't think of anything. And it's definitely not something I would want to see. When you're like, you can go camp out, I'm like, no, I'll stay home.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I've heard the theory, I've talked about this a lot with my brother, because we're from the Ohio Valley, so we grew up really close to the Ohio River, and we've heard this legend before. And he kind of joked, what if it's all that sludge from the industrial era that got into the rivers? And I'm like, the first sighting was in 1700s. I don't think it's that. And even if that were the case, we make jokes about catfish the size of Buicks in the Ohio. When The Simpsons came out and they had a pet fish with 3 eyes, that joke just went right over our heads. We were like, yeah, that happens. I don't know what's weird here. So this thing is very, very old enough to be referenced by native cultures and have a name from native culture. So I was like, that's this thing. I can't even fathom what it could possibly be.
And again, it's this idea of are there more of them, or is it like sea turtles, which live for, hundreds of years or whatever,
Right.
and it's just some creature that just ages very slowly, and it doesn't it's just still around. You got to wonder that with a lot of these reptilian style cryptids is do they just have a longer lifespan? And I would imagine if it's something, the interesting thing is if it's something that big, it's got to either have a very slow metabolism or it's got to eat a lot. So we're either not seeing it eat, we've talked about it grabbing deer, but we're either not seeing it do that, probably because it's coming out at night, or it's like a snake, it eats once and then it's good for an extended period of time. Wasn't that the plot of Lake Placid too? The crocodile comes out and then just eats every once in a while and then goes back into the water, and Betty White's feeding it or something. But spoiler alert for Lake Placid 20 years ago. But
yeah, you've had 30, 40 years to see Lake Placid. If you haven't seen it yet, that's on you.
Yeah, that was my question. Is are there more of them, or is this the same thing, kind of just going around?
It's been sighted all over, and there's even been sightings said up in Maine.
wow.
Oh my gosh.
So this thing has if there's either multiple, then it's spread all throughout this river system. which I kind of love that the Monongahela is the center point of where this thing is lurking about, because out of the two rivers, like the three rivers, obviously, but between the Allegheny and the Mon is definitely the creepier river. Like that is the Bad News Bears River. I don't know what it is about it. It just has a dark energy. I think it's like all the sins from the south side got washed into it, and it's just
Yes.
bad vibes. I don't know.
I love that theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting, these aquatic cryptid creatures, because we do think of them isolated in that way. But like you're saying, this is a big river system. But to get all the way up to Maine, it almost seems like Ray, who doesn't seem to have any land capabilities, is truly stuck and isolated. But this creature can go wherever, which makes it creepier. You have to watch everywhere.
Yeah.
That is, absolutely. It's perfect for a horror movie. We need to get on that.
Yes.
Someone needs to
Before publishing the episode. Any final thoughts on those or any other forest fiends, is how I've been calling them, that we covered?
I love that title.
You guys need to make t-shirts of that. It says Forest Fiends with all the cryptids on it. That, like, all like holding hands like they're friends.
Support your local wildlife, and it's like the Geewoggle.
I feel like they would be
Just
friends.
squonks.
I hope they'd be friends.
Yeah, or
They
like
gotta
be
be right.
creepy, do crime, and the Geewoggle spray painting someone's barn. Just
I love that. So on Pip, what we do to end the episode is we say, would we go to this place of paranormal phenomena? But for this one, I think we should do it as like, would we want to encounter these? So we can just go down the line. So first, the Cook Forest werewolf.
Yeah. I think there's a potential for romance there. I mean, even though I'm a happily married woman, I still like the idea that they're out there and they're looking for love, and they're just trying to keep the family growing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so romantic, the idea that the pack still watches over the grave.
Yes, that's so sweet.
Yeah, of all the wolf creatures we've talked about today, it's definitely the sweetest. Like it's not as aggressive as like some of the other, other cryptids we've talked about. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested in like encountering it.
And then the squonk, I think we kind of all already said we would just like to leave it alone.
Big hug. Just give it a big hug and send it on its way. That's all.
Yes. If I could somehow come in contact with it without scaring it or making it uncomfortable, absolutely. But for the most part, just let it be.
I feel like it's like a middle schooler. Just the less attention you give it, the better. Like it's just going through a phase.
Yeah. Leave some Pedialyte and walk away.
Yeah.
And then Raystown Ray, I would love to see this.
Same.
Yes, absolutely.
Got to go in April.
We just missed
Every
our
weekend
window.
in April.
I know.
Yeah,
we
time.
just missed
4 days late.
Oh my gosh. It's got to be a year in advance planning.
Next year, we'll record a special episode where we're on location.
We're going to go wakeboarding off of the Raystown Ray.
Something I did think about, I don't know if I grew up with family in northern Wisconsin, so we used to do like all the outdoors things. Do you know those like depth fish finders? They'll like scan the water. I wonder if you could use something like that in Raystown Lake.
Yeah, that would be because I know they've tried to do that with Loch Ness as well, and Loch Ness is so deep that they've had trouble mapping it. But I wonder how deep. Oh, I actually have it here. The lake spans about 30 miles and contains 8,300 acres of water. Depths of the lake being over 185 feet deep. The lake remains over 100 feet deep at 7 points. So that's pretty deep. So I'd be curious to see if they pick up any weird anomalies with that in April. So fascinating.
I'm trying to look up what is the range of fishing sonar. It's given me it in hertz, so I don't know how to convert kilohertz to feet. So we'll show depth reading of up to 100 feet, so it definitely still could hide. Okay, moving on to the Giwoggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's the angsty teen of our cryptids. Of course, I'd want to encounter it. It's hilarious. Like, it is, even though it's probably not actually that funny, it is probably the funniest cryptid we have today. That it's just like, yeah, it's just gonna cause some vandalism. That's it. It's just gonna be like, if it flattened your tire and it's like an inconvenience, but it's not gonna try to kill you or anything.
I don't smoke, but I feel like I would smoke cigarettes with the Giwoggle and hit a few mailboxes with a baseball bat. Like, I feel like it's just wake up, I'm in a silly, goofy mood, and I just want to go.
See Cat driving down the road in a convertible with hanging out while the Giwoggle's driving, just smashing mailboxes.
Yeah, you're like, here's this alcohol I stole from my parents.
Yeah.
You're over 21. Shh.
We drank some of it and filled it with water, man. Me and the Giwoggle. Wow. Rock and roll.
Even the name is just so silly.
I know.
It's hard to say Giwoggle with a straight face.
Yeah. And think of it as menacing.
Yes.
Right.
The Bryn Athen beast, I think, would be the one that I would want to least encounter because it sounds scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is unlike our discoverers. I would not be like, let's get it. I would definitely not want to encounter the beast.
Cardio is not my forte.
Yeah, no.
Although, Kat, the one that you brought might be tied as I can't remember how to pronounce the name.
It's weird. It's Ogua. Ogua. Very odd spelling.
That is
I think
the one
it's tied.
Yeah, that is the one where I'm like in the middle. Like, I'd want to see it if I saw it from a distance, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's like amazing. Look at this thing. And then I would probably never, not that I ever go in the rivers now, but I would absolutely never go in the rivers ever again. I'd be like, move me out of Pittsburgh. Get me out of here. I can't,
Yeah, I agree with you, Sarah. I don't want to encounter it, but I will happily, Patreon goal. I want the two guys from Bryn Athen to go full-blown crocodile hunter on the Ogua. Look at this beaut and just tackle it.
Yes.
Their catchphrase is just "Let's get it." Like, that's they have a YouTube show or something, and it's like it's the "Let's get it" guys. They just go hunting cryptids and like, let's get it.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That would be so funny because that intensity would only be relevant for some of them. Like the squawk, they're like, let's get it. And the squawk is just crying in the corner.
The poor squawk. We had talked briefly about, I mentioned the melon heads from Ohio, and Ryan had talked about the night crawlers from Fresno, and I have a friend who's an artist, and I'm trying to commission stickers of the night crawlers that say dilly dallying. So if those come in, I'm gonna let you know. I'm gonna send you some.
Yes.
Please do.
Start a line.
Thank you guys so much for being on the show and talking with us. It was great to get to meet you guys because we've been listening to your podcast. So thank you. Well, that was so great to have Twice the Terror on our podcast. Definitely go check them out. They cover all things spooky, all things horror, everything from cryptids to their favorite horror film. And again, you can find them at Twice the Terror on Instagram. And from there, you can find their Spotify and YouTube to listen to them. Thank you so much for stopping by, Twice the Terror.